Thank you for watching this quick video on the integration between Planning Analytics and Git. I want to talk about why this is important. So the integration of GitHub and PA will allow larger teams to manage change professionally with best practices. PA is used by enterprises, and the source code control across environments is important, and teams are getting larger. So what's really changed? Well, with the recent rollout of PA 86, there are now native integrations with GitHub within Workspace. So what are we going to do today? So first of all, what are the prerequisites? So you need Git or Git desktop already installed. You really just need access to Git bash to generate some SSH keys, which I'll go through. You'll need a GitHub account. So you can go to github.com and just sign up for an account. One small thing to note is if any of your dimension files are larger than 50 megs, an individual dimension, you need an enterprise account to have source code control on those. The regular GitHub accounts have a limit of 50 megs for each individual file that is being managed. So what are we going to do in GitHub? Well, we're going to create a repository. We're going to initialize it. We're then going to create SSH keys on my workstation, and we're going to register those in GitHub. Then in Planning Analytics, we're going to push our prod environment user objects to the repository as a prod branch. And then we're going to push the prod environment user objects to a repository as our dev branch. So from prod. So we have two identical branches, and we can kind of work with them as we go through our development process. So here we are in GitHub. We're going to create a repository. The way to create a repository is on the plus icon on the top right. You can say new repository. Give it a name. We're going to call this one SmartCo. This is an IBM PA demo model. It could be public or private. Make it public for now. You can just automatically initialize it by just checking the add a README file. Create repository. So now we have our repository all set up, which has got a name and it's got one README file in it. Great, that's all we really need for now. So now we're going to go back and we're going to generate our SSH keys. For generating our SSH keys, we want to make sure we have the instructions handy for how to do that. So I'll put the link to this GitHub article in the notes. And you'll also want to make sure we have a certain folder open up on your local computer. If you don't have this folder already, don't worry, that it'll get created as part of the steps we're going to do. So it's c:/users/ your username /.ssh. If the folder is already there, it may be empty already, but we'll take care of that. And now we're going to run git bash. So the git bash is just a command line tool that would get installed with Git or the Git desktop toolset. The first instruction we're going to do, aside from opening git bash, is we're going to run the keygen. So typing that command in, pressing enter, it's going to say where do I save it? You can just keep pressing enter. You don't need to put in a passphrase. It'll show you the little image, and then if you do have this folder open, you'll notice it'll automatically create those two files. And then we can kind of keep stepping through the instructions. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to run this eval statement so that it adds it to the SSH agent. So we'll type in that same command, press enter. It'll come back, just give us an agent and a process ID. That's all good to go. Next one is adding our new identity here. So we'll just run this SSH add command. Now with that command type entered, I can press enter and it'll say identity added. It'll give me that details of that identity, and at this point we're all set. It's been created, it's been added to the SSH. One last step we will need to do is add that to our GitHub account. So now let's go back to GitHub. So back here at GitHub, we want to add these credentials to our user. So as you go, you want to click on your icon for your user ID on the top right, go into settings. On the left work pane, we want to select SSH and GPG keys. And you might not have any set up, and that's fine. So we're going to create a new one, a new SSH key. I'm just going to call it SSH key. And then you'll see in the contents here, it says that it should start with SSH dash, which it will. Now those files that we created, if I look back at the files that were created, I'll notice that one had no suffix and one has a .pub suffix. The .pub is the public one. Now if I right click on it and open it in Notepad, or I happen to use Notepad++, it's going to show me that it's a big long key. I can hit Control-A, Control-C, and then click back over here to paste it into that text box and add the SSH key. And now that's all set up. So now we have generated our keys and added them to our GitHub account. So we're ready to go into Planning Analytics Workspace. So now that we're back in Workspace, we want to start publishing this information into our GitHub repository. So let's take a quick peek at our repository as well. So right now we have a SmartCo repository. There's nothing in it just aside from this README file, and there's no other branches. If I go into Workspace, I can click on the SmartCo item, or hover over SmartCo, and I'll see my 3 dots. When I click on that, I'll now get an option to add objects to repository. Now when this comes up, you'll likely need to enter your URL, which will be in this format. It's likely git@github.com:username/github repository.git. The first one, the public key. So remember those 2 files that we generated in your .ssh folder. The .pub one, if you open that in a text editor, you can just paste the contents in the second text box. And this one without the suffix, you open that up in text editor and paste that in the next text box. If you had a passphrase, you could enter that. I chose not to use a passphrase here. And now when I click next, so once this comes up, it'll show you all the objects that are in this case, my SmartCo database. So I can pick all the ones I want to publish into my repository. I'm only going to pick the user objects. I'm not going to do my control ones. I've had some challenges with different databases and doing the control objects, so I'm going to try and keep this a bit clean. So I just pick my cubes, dimensions, processes, and chores. I can get more specific if I want to, but I imagine for the first initial push, you probably want to just have everything in there. So I'm going to hit next. It's going to ask me, well, where do I want to put these? And I'm going to say, put this into a new branch. I'm going to call prod and create the branch based off of mean. And I'll give it a comment to say the initial push to prod branch. And I'm going to click add. And then now it's going off to do that for me. If I click refresh on my list of databases here, I'll notice that the icon has changed just a touch. For SmartCo, it's got a little rounded arrow on the bottom right of that icon. And if I were to look at if I look at the databases here, I can see that the post, it's running a Git plan. And I just saw a message pop up that it was done successfully, so we're all set, and the Git plan is done. If you're watching the threads, you'll see one Git push first, and then Git plans. It'll run that API. And now if we look back at SmartCo, see it's still, I just have to refresh it, and then now the icon's gone back to normal. Now what if I want to apply that stuff? So here I'm going to go into my SmartCo dev database. I'm going to say update model from repository. So here I've got the same information. I can just click authenticate. Now it's going to ask me which branch I want to pull from. So I'm going to pull from my prod branch. I'm going to click update. It says creating an update plan, and now it's showing me an update plan. So I can view this to see, well, what are the items that it's going to do. Some of these are just going to be skip statements because I've done this a couple of times at this point. But now when I click execute, I should see that execute. And right away it says updated model from repository successfully. So now if I go and look at my SmartCo dev database, I'm going to see that it has all of the dimensions and cubes that I had in my original one, but now I've copied them from one to another through the repository. So on the same database, it's almost equivalent as copying the data folder, but you could do this across environments. You can be very surgical by using branches, and it also gives you the flexibility to use some of that branching and merging features of GitHub to be very specific around changes and change control. Thanks for watching. I hope this has been helpful, and if you have any comments, let me know.